here at this event today, which will discuss about sustainable spatial development. Okay, firstly, I would like to welcome Ibu Rita Padawangi ST MDP PhD as the representative of the Department Urban and Regional Planning, and at the moment serve as the head of Master Program of Urban and Regional Planning. And our honorable guest lecturer, Ibu Rita Padawangi PhD. And our honorable guest lecturer today, invited lecturer Ibu Rita Padawangi PhD, College of Interdisciplinary and Experiental Learning, Singapore University of Social Science. And host lecturer, Bapak Dr. Samsul Ma'rif, and the moderator, also Ibu Mada Sophianingrum, ST MSc. Welcome to our beloved lecturers from the Urban and Regional Planning Department, students, and everyone who is joining online from Zoom and the YouTube channel. Okay, before we jump to the main event, please kindly see the event agenda for today. Okay, first is opening by me as MC, Nimas Sudrarsati, and then opening remarks from the head of Master Program Department Urban and Regional Planning, Ibu Rita Padawangi. And then the first lecture is about spatial justice from civic space to alternative development by Ibu Rita Padawangi PhD. And then the second lecture is about sustainable development of small border island by Dr. Samsul Ma'rif, and then discussion and conclusion, and the last is closing with the photo session. Okay, now I would like to welcome the opening speech from Ibu Rita Padawangi STMDP PhD as the representative of the Department of Urban and Regional Planning, and at the moment serve as the head of Master Program of Urban and Regional Planning. Okay, okay, and maybe for Ibu Rita, the time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Nimas. Already open this event nicely as an MC. Our Honorable Ibu Rita Padawangi, PhD from Singapore University of Social Sciences, and also the host lecturer, Pak Samsul Ma'rif, and also Bu Mada as moderator, and also our guests from Universitas, Ibu Diana, from UTY, Ibu Anissa, and also from UT, Pak Guntur, and also all of the guests and also students. Welcome to this sustainable spatial development topic, one of the topic in Urban and Regional Scientific Forum. Welcome to this event, and we hope that it's not only to increase the network and understand both university and other university, but hopefully with this event, we can increase our knowledge as well. And I'm on behalf of head of department. Right now, I'm a head of master degree on urban regional planning. I officially open this event. So once again, hopefully we can have increased knowledge from this event. So thank you, and the time is yours for Nimas.
Okay, thank you so much for the welcoming remarks from Ibu Rita. And next, moving on to the main agenda. The agenda is I hand over this lecture to Ibu Mada as a moderator. Please welcome Bu Mada.
Yes, thank you, Nimas. Okay, thank you. Okay, everyone. So maybe we will start our first lecture from Ibu Rita. So I would like to read a little bit introduction about Bu Rita. Sorry, Bu Rita. Okay, so maybe I will. Okay, so this is a short introduction about Bu Rita. Bu Rita now is what I called Burita. If I am mistaken, I'm sorry. So Burita now in the colleague of Interdisciplinary and Experimental Learning Singapore University of Social Science in Singapore. Burita got the PhD from Loyola University Chicago, and Burita very concerned about, I think I make a little bit like a marks, yeah, Burita, more about the resilience as heritage in Asia and the public space in Indonesia. Also about civil society activism as struggle for space in urbanizing in Southeast Asia. So maybe Burita is more about the Southeast Asia, and many of the journal papers talking about the city, the rural economic, and maybe if you want to know more about Burita, we will directly hear the lecture from Burita. So Burita, hello.
Hello, Bu Mada.
Hello. So yeah, thank you so much for your time here for our guest lecture today. So maybe we will start for our first lecture from Burita directly. Time is your, Burita.
Thank you, Bu Mada. Thank you
Yeah.
so much, everybody, for being with us today. I think since this is an international speaker series, I just use English, is it, Bu Mada?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. But just let me know if anytime if you wanna, if you want to do conversations in Indonesian language, I will also be happy to do that. Maybe I should also begin with some clarification. Bu Mada, I'm so sorry, mohon maaf. Tadi some of the papers in the CV that you show were actually not mine. Yeah. So
Oh, sorry.
yeah. So so the first one was correct. I'm not sure about the other one. So anyway,
Okay.
I just want
sorry
to
for
point
the.
that out.
Sorry for that. I'm sorry.
I could see like the city and the temptation to overlook. Yeah, that one is mine, and that one was my most recent paper. Resilience as Heritage in Asia was also correct. That's also an edited book that just came up in 2025. So yeah, so let me just share my screen. Yeah, I just want to point that out because I'm just worried that it looks like as if I'm claiming other people's work, but that's not mine. Okay, so when I was invited to give this international lecture, I did ask the organizers what kind of topic should we bring today, and there were several topics that were being suggested, including the one that connected with the paper that I just mentioned, The City and the Temptation to Overlook. But then I offer this topic instead. This is a topic on spatial justice. And I should admit this one, an earlier version of this presentation has been given last month in Bandung. So if any of you attended Plano Cosmo in ITB, you might find these slides very familiar. But this, I try to sort of also reflect more on this topic about spatial justice because I was told that the topic is mostly about sustainable spatial development. And when I thought about sustainability, it really brought me back to this recent trip that I did last month. So let me just also tell you why I put this photo first. So I just came back from Nairobi in Kenya last month, and this photo was taken from an informal settlement. And the name of the informal settlement, the area was named Mukuru. And at that time, we were looking at this river called the Ngong River. Ngong River is one of the subsidiary of Nairobi River. And as you could see, the river is, the water doesn't look very clean. And it was indeed really polluted with industrial pollution, as well as waste, not just industrial waste, but also domestic household waste that are dumped directly to the river. So we can always see this problem as a problem of sustainability. Of course, this kind of environment does not really come across as a sustainable environment. There might be a lot of hygiene issues, as well as other other kinds of health implications that come out from this pollution. And this is a very very dense neighborhood. I was told that the the number of people living in informal settlements always very difficult to predict. But this one is in hundreds of thousands. It's probably reaching probably about 300,000 settlers in this informal settlement alone. So the reason why I'd like to open with this picture is that oftentimes when we see cities, we would like to see images that are more sort of upscale, modern images with high-rise buildings, with very much like very planned neighborhoods and spaces. However, as we are living in a world that is often still have a lot of social inequalities, even if in cities with really nice images of the central area, the business district, and others, usually there will be areas that are less that's sort of like I would say probably neglected and marginalized, but they're still part of the same city. And since we are mostly here and we from from an institution in Indonesia, that really do something about urban and regional planning, then we would like to kind of like reflect how these kinds of inequalities that happen in cities, how would that actually relate to not just in terms of what we do as planners, but also about how our society actually has evolved. And just yesterday, I saw an article that was really provocative. So from Nairobi, let's move back to Indonesia. So the Nairobi is in East Africa. We are just separated by the Indian Ocean in Indonesia's west side, right? But I just saw this article on the conversation, and sorry, I didn't, that's why I asked, is it English or Indonesian language? My screenshot is in Indonesian language. And this was an article on the conversation by faculty member from Universitas Erlangga, questioning about this notion of a predatory country. And they explain about, what it means by negara predatoris. But one thing we can agree or disagree about the term that is being used in this article. But it is, I think, one thing that we can agree on is that the problem of inequalities, and both in terms of social and economic inequality, but also power inequality in making decisions, is really rampant in many places. So I started with Nairobi just now. And then we move on to Indonesia and some other, oftentimes things that are happening in one place would affect things that are happening in other places. So things that are happening in one city, things that are happening in the central business district, it affects the ones that are happening in the kampungs behind them. Things that are happening in the kampungs behind them also eventually affect the central areas. And also things that are happening in Indonesia, things that are happening in one island might actually affect things that are happening in other islands, And when I was teaching my students this semester, I showed them this photo, and I did ask them, what do you make of this photo? The class is about environmental sustainability and the Anthropocene, but I don't know. I think if the chat is active, if any of you would like to sense to give your opinion, whether where this place is, maybe some of the small fonts on the footnote there may give out the location. But if any of you know like where this photo was taken, you can type that in the chat if you want, if the chat is available. Yeah. So So this photo is showing trash on the beach, right? And and you see all these cleaners are cleaning all these waste, all these garbage on the beach. The question would be that, I mean, it's easy to assume that all these trash are actually coming from people who are visiting the beach. But the story is always more complicated than that, right? So the trash that are accumulating in this beach might not all come from the beach. It might come from other beaches. It might come from other cities. It might come from a nearby island, right? So I think, when we talk about sustainability, then we need to also be mindful about all these different impacts, different environmental impacts, different social impacts that are happening in one area versus another. And if we are planning for more sustainable cities, more sustainable places, sustainable kinds of developments, then sustainability needs to also factor in the fact that in many places our society remains unequal, and if we don't remember this inequality, then we might risk um, 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 actually compromising the situation that we call spatial justice. Yeah. So I found that the framework of spatial justice is useful to remind us that when we talk about development, when we talk about sustainability, then there needs to be a sense of also justice. Justice may be something about fairness, but it's not just fairness. Yeah. So when we look into the concept of spatial justice, then we might inquire what it entails. Spatial justice, maybe some of us would be reminded of the work of Edward Soja. He had this book titled Seeking Spatial Justice, and then several other authors have also written about it. Mustafa Dikash, for example, he has also written about spatial justice, and this is just a summary of different aspects that have been covered in when we think about spatial justice, what it entails. One is accessibility, whether a provision of a public good is accessible for many different groups in society, and then affordability, which is also related to accessibility, but this is touching more into the economic side of things, whether provision of public goods is actually affordable for everyone, and then the sustainability. Right, sustainability, of course, it's not just about. Of course, it's about environmental sustainability, but it's not just about environment, but the sustainability, how we actually sustain this across generations. Right, when we have achieved accessibility, affordability, how would that actually sustain? Is it really just propped up by certain kinds of ad hoc subsidies, or whether it's a system that is more sustainable towards the future? Yeah. And there are also two other things, actually, when we think about spatial justice. Again, this relates to what I said just now, that justice is not just about fairness, about distributing things evenly, about how we distribute. Some people get this, some people get that, and we say that, okay, the distributionally is just, adil gitu ya. But there is also this thing called procedural justice, and while we tend to think when we say, okay, we provide this housing for the poor, for example, and when we distribute, it sounds fine, but why does it not work? Like, for example, when we say, okay, we remove certain kinds of we remove certain kinds of settlements from the city, and then we provide rusunawa, so people get new homes, so they are not deprived of having homes, right? So presumably that sounds, a fair distribution. But the question would be, how are the procedures to get to that distribution? And so this is the notion of the procedural justice, which I would discuss a bit more about that, because this is one thing that often becomes more difficult for planners and policymakers that needs to make those decisions. These are the things that are more that needs more attention to navigate. So procedural justice is something. There are these four elements that we need to look at when we say about procedural justice. It's not about just distributing things, but first of all, it's about neutrality, that decisions are unbiased and they are guided by transparent reasoning. And then there's respect, that all are treated with respect and dignity. And mostly the affected population should be treated with respect and dignity. And then people have a voice, that all are given a chance to tell their side of the story. And also about trustworthiness, that decision makers convey trustworthy motives about those who are impacted by their decisions. So in the background, I'm showing these photos from an eviction that happened in Jakarta about 10 years ago. So procedural justice, it speaks to the idea of fair processes and how people's perception of fairness is strongly impacted by the quality of their experiences, not just by the end result of these experiences. So in considering procedural justice, it is always important to ask the who question. So when we look at these photos about a community being evicted, then the who question is very important to be asked here. Who decides on urban plans? Who is included in those urban plans and who are excluded? Is everyone treated with respect and dignity? Do they have a voice, right? So this community here was affected by the flood alleviation projects in Jakarta at that time. So then the who question in investigating procedural justice, then we ask questions like, who make the decision on these projects? Who is being involved? Who decides on the approaches that are being used? Who gets affected? Are those who decide, are they getting affected? And if those who are affected are different from those who decide, how do they decide who is getting, who is having a voice and not? Who benefits from the projects and who is sacrificed? So at this point, then we start to realize that if we look at urban projects of city improvement, urban renewal, may not be always spatially just. So when we think that we are going to improve a certain situation, if we are intervening in a society that has inequality in it, and most societies actually have some inequality, then we need to be mindful that these improvement projects may not always be spatially just. And so the increasing demand for addressing sustainability, may contradict spatial justice. Actually, for example, if we have beautification projects that marginalize affected groups through residential or economic displacement. So let's look at our cities then right now. How are we actually faring in terms of paving the way into more sustainable and more just cities? So until now, we know that cities and urban development are still treated as engines of economic growth. So now more than 50% of the world population is urban. I know most of us here know about this, right? So that means, what does urban mean? So being urban means we live in a relatively higher density place, and we are moving into more non-agricultural economy. So more people are participating in non-agricultural economies. And we also have more population diversity as a result of urbanization. Cities continue to become economic centers and center of power, and urban areas and urban life, they are still becoming the social and economic aspirations of many people. Yeah, and then now with this in mind, when we look at the concept of procedural justice, then one of it is neutrality, right? But when we saw that, urban areas and urban life are still the aspirations of many people, and what do we mean by neutrality and unbiasedness in procedural justice when it comes to urbanization? Yeah. So the way we develop cities and the way we urbanize may actually, are not really in line with this sense of neutrality and unbiasedness. And here we need to also be aware that there is this term called the urban bias. So the fact that our world is continuing to be urbanizing, that our cities are seen as the engines of economic growth, that is actually risking us to fall into what is called the urban bias. What does urban bias mean? Well, the urban bias happens when, let's say, there are policies that benefit the urban rather than the non-urban. So even if it is said for economic growth, it is still known as the urban bias if the policies are benefiting the urban more than the non-urban. Yeah. So urban bias often leads to exploitation of natural resources and unequal land ownership and control systems and other things that might come out from there. Meanwhile, the policies that benefit the urban are driven by elite interests. So the elites often reside in urban areas, right, as centers of power and economy. So in this case, we can ask, who decides? So if there is a kind of development that is happening, and later on we'll see a presentation from Pak Samsul about small islands, right? But let's talk, when we talk about the non-urban in general, let's say if there is a project in a non-urban area, this is just an example this is a Wall Street Journal coverage on the proposal of building a resort in West Java. And apparently, the resort project was owned by a business in Indonesia who is partnering with Donald Trump. And so, if Donald Trump and his business partner in Indonesia wanted to assume grace in West Java to build a resort, then who actually benefits from that? Can residents actually disagree from it? So those are the questions that we need to ask when we are investigating this term of spatial justice in many kinds of developments that are happening. The concept of spatial justice itself was an iteration from Henri Lefebvre's classic book called The Production of Space. Yeah. So Henri Lefebvre's Production of Space is a critique of capitalism-driven urbanization. In the same work, Lefebvre also pointed out that nature is subject to exploitation and resource extraction. Yeah. So he said, this is a direct quote from the book, as a source and as resource, nature obsesses us. Even if everyone wants to protect and save nature, nobody wants to stand in the way of an attempt to retrieve its authenticity. Like, who doesn't like nature, right? Every time we say, oh, green is good, blue is good, Yet at the same time, everything conspires to harm it. Yeah, the fact that natural space will soon be lost to view. Anyone so inclined may look over their shoulder and see it sinking below the horizon behind us. So in Indonesia, we might be familiar that last month there has been, it's all over the news media that there was a serious flood actually hit the urban areas of Bali, right? So Bali as an island that is very famous, tourism, not just for its culture actually, but also for its nature. Many tourists actually go to Bali because of its nature and how the culture actually relates to the nature, right? So this is actually an example in which the development that are happening, it conspires to harm it, right? Even if, let's say, okay, tourism is the development of economic growth, but at the same time, when we talk about sustainability, how sustainable it is, how just it is, that is a question that is oftentimes not many people would like to answer. By the way, this photo is from an area around Ubud in Bali. Yeah, you can see that these are the greeneries. Everybody want to enjoy the greeneries. Everybody want to see the lush jungles. They're still there. But we can see those resorts are popping up. And these are at some point there is a possibility of compromising the sustainability. Yeah. So yeah, even in places like Bali, for example, in which nature is one of the appeal of tourism as the main driver of the economy, nature is also subject to exploitation, endless encroachments of nature exploitative and environmentally degrading developments that are financed by those in big cities, such as developers in Jakarta or elsewhere in the world. Yeah, so it doesn't always have to come from big cities in Indonesia. It can come from anyone, right? The investors. So these are just some photos that screenshots from a website that I believe now defunct. This was when there was that controversy about land reclamation in Bali. Yeah. So, and fast forward to today, this was from the recent flood, right? News reports indicated 154 tons of trash that were left behind, and observers have pointed to the loss of green spaces and agricultural areas as the cause of flood. So if we go back to the concept of procedural justice, what is fair here? Who is benefiting from environmental destruction and who is bearing the cost? Does everyone have a voice? Is everyone being treated with respect and dignity? In other contexts, there have been, other kinds of approaches in which, nature has been given a voice, in policy making. We can look at an example of New Zealand, for example, how they try to look at the rivers and the custodianship of rivers. So they're given a voice in policy making. That is in that context. How would we look at the context of Indonesia? Therefore, I would say that why I want to look at civic spaces. In achieving spatial justice, I think civic spaces are essential when the principles of neutrality, voice, respect, and trustworthiness are not fulfilled. So civic spaces are autonomous spaces where community and civil society associations effectively gather, debate, vote on, and participate in issues concerning the local and broader urban community. Yeah, for example, again, going back to the case of Bali Reclamation Plan 9 years ago, hundreds of individuals, local non-governmental organizations, desa adat, student bodies, youth organizations, artists, and musicians, they form a civil society alliance called For Bali, in which they believe that the Benoa Bay reclamation would be devastating to Bali as a whole. So civic spaces where communities discuss and mobilize can be in local community spaces, such as what we see on the right. Yeah. So on the top right, that is actually a discussion. It's just a small discussion of communities who was being affected by a planned flood alleviation project plan. Yeah. So they are gathering to look at how their settlement are going to be affected by those projects and try to think about alternatives and try to voice that these are our concerns and we do have alternatives. So that's the story of the picture on the top right. Picture on the top right, bottom right is more recent. That one was about a discussion by various communities, urban poor communities and their facilitators. And they were talking about agrarian reform in urban areas. And since the issue of agrarian reform is still not settled yet in Indonesia, so there have been civil society groups as well as academics who are being actively involved in providing inputs to policymakers. And I know that some of the groups actually brought this to the policymakers in Jakarta. Yeah. But civic spaces can be, starting with these small spaces of discussions. But some of these discussions may actually turn into something that is, more confrontational if if the kind of problems in terms of communicating with policymakers continue to occur. So in that case, then there must be spaces in which these voices can be brought to the table as well. So when we talk about civic spaces, then we should also talk about spaces in which the relationships in the city might not feel that that comfortable, right? So spaces of protest, for example, they are essential in understanding and operationalizing spatial justice, especially when we think about procedural justice. So these spaces can be in the affected communities, such as this one in Pati, in Rembang, that was affected by a cement factory development. But when we look at cities, cities have always been strategic places for protest because they are centers of power and economies. But that is always the consequence of being center of power and center of economy, right? So residents from the countryside, they may come to bring their concerns from outside the city to amplify the protest messages. If they're not being heard in the countryside, then the cities usually are the places to voice that. So this is an example of women farmers from Kendeng who came to Jakarta to protest the cement factory that was affecting their villages. So public spaces in the city become important connections between the urban and the non-urban, and plays a part in spatial justice as a process, So Kendeng women are not the only example. Several years before this, we saw, so this is a photo in 2007 of displaced villagers of Porong. So these are villagers who were displaced by the mud volcano in Porong across the presidential palace in Jakarta. But they're also continuing to voice their concerns at the disaster site. So this is in Jakarta, while this was in Porong Sidoarjo. So that was a mud flow disaster due to gas exploration. And that is another case of environmental destruction that were driven by urban bias development. And examples are abundant. So this is another one. So this is when farmers from Indramayu protested the development of a coal power plant nearby their land. So they went to Jakarta because the coal power plant was supported by JICA, and then they went to the JICA office to protest, but they also continue to protest at their farm. So we can start seeing these urban-rural connections because of, the urban bias development. Urban bias development, we must be realistic. They continue to take place. That Indonesia continues to urbanize, and there have been conversions of farms and plantations. Colliding interests of farm workers and landowners, given that many farm workers in Indonesia are not the landowners. And there's also declining and aging agricultural sector, and also shifting from primary sector to secondary and tertiary sectors indicate further challenges to spatial justice and exacerbation of environmental degradation. So for example, in Banten, 1,000 hectares of farmland and 450 hectares of fisheries had been rezoned as industrial area. And their declining fisherfolk population and traditional fisheries. I think, in the past, Bu Susi is always voicing her concern about this, right? The decline of the traditional fisherfolk fisheries. And then shifting work from the primary sector to secondary and tertiary sector, from food production to labor, commerce, and services. And this also pushed the migration to urban areas and also to overseas. And this actually raises questions. So if we don't produce the food, if everyone is shifting into labor, commerce, service, who will produce the food, right? Everyone still needs to eat. And when there are more and more farms converted into industries, then what does it say to our own sustainability? Because again, continuing to urbanize, of course, we can say that economic growth is for economic growth. But if it also means to shifting to non-agricultural sector, that means that there are more questions to be asked. how sustainable is it that of that pattern of urbanization? So we continue to see stories like this, that the north coast of Java is sinking, and yes, of course we can argue maybe is sea level rise, isn't it climate change, that maybe it's sea level rise, but and so let's just protect our coast with a wall. But the tricky point is that it's not just about the climate change. It's also about the environmental degradation, the local overdevelopment and industrialization that is happening in Java. And studies have shown that the sinking is predominantly caused by the environmental degradation of the island and overdevelopment rather than the sea level rise. For example, when Jakarta is sinking, when sea level rise is probably less than 1 centimeter per year, the land sinking, the land subsidence is actually probably 10 times greater than that. So all these urban bias developments would eventually come back to haunt cities with more extreme disasters such as floods. This one is in Semarang, right? I think Semarang is sinking faster than Jakarta right now. But unfortunately, the most common reaction is still by further environmentally degrading structure. Yeah. So the more contradictions we have, between spatial justice and also the environmental sustainability, the more we actually see accumulations of conflicts, conflicts that don't just happen in the countryside, not just happen in the rural areas, but also in cities, because there are more and more concerns from all these extraction of resources that are being done to fuel all these developments that come to the city. And in Indonesia, of course, we know that these spaces for protest have reopened in Indonesia since 1998, and it has since become an emblem of a democratic society. Yeah, so prior to the 1998 Reformasi, it was that the Suharto regime, you have to get permission from the police, and they were criminally punishable. But after 1998, the permission was actually reframed as written notification, and that it's more open for these protests. So I would say that many of these civic spaces, there are trajectories, and so this is an example how a small civic space is actually can build up to actually this to go into this process that we call the procedural justice. Yeah. So protest spaces are part of the whole procedural justice cycle, especially in the context of lack of trustworthiness of authorities. So here's an example of Ekoton, that they conduct their activities and research on Sungai Brantas. Yeah, and it's actually not well, it's not that far from Surabaya, but it's also not that near, right? And Ekoton also invite people to participate in their activities, and they do sampling of water. They tested the samples of water in their lab for further research and discussion. But the photo on the bottom right is their protest to the city of Surabaya for not handling the waste, especially diapers, properly. Yeah. So when we see the protest that is happening in cities like this, there are, it is actually an accumulation of the concerns from the non-urban areas, right? From the whole river system, the environmental concern, where when that is not being handled, then of course all these would open up questions about procedural justice and in cities as well. Yeah. So civic spaces, therefore, are components of procedural justice. Right? Very importantly, one of those civic spaces are places of protest to raise voices of concern. But how do we get there? As planners, can we actually plan spaces of protest? And are those spaces emerging contextually rather than planned? Can they ever be planned, right? To what extent are these public spaces planned? And to what extent are they open to interpretation of users? So again, we can ask the same question: who makes decisions about these spaces? in whose interest are those decisions being made? People can also be, supporting infrastructures of civic spaces. Yeah, I would say that the answer might be in the smaller spaces of the city, in which sometimes we consider them as unplanned, right? But if we just take a step back and think that, um, our is can we think about planning in a broader sense? Can we think about communities as also planning for their own areas? Yeah. So people's ability to reinterpret and appropriate spaces, they're abundant and they're everywhere. Yeah. This is an example of this place this is just under a flyover in Jakarta, and it's tucked in, and suddenly you can take a peek and you can see pool tables there, just under this highway. And of course, there's a certain community here. Maybe it's a restricted community, an exclusive community, but somebody planned this place. Somebody actually did this, or some groups actually come up with this, right? So this is an expression of voicing aspirations of what the space could and should be, right? Rather than just being an empty space under a flyover, then there is use of the place. So spatial justice, therefore, is a process of creating and recreating spaces towards representing diverse voices and respect towards various groups. So learning from small spaces may be maybe something that we can do to learn about what can we do, to start making our cities, making our regions more sustainable. Bottom-up spaces can also be potentials of addressing environmental degradation. Like these are some examples. The left side is actually from Jakarta. You can see that this is a mural saying cukup kenangan mantan yang dibuang sembarangan, tapi sampah jangan dibuang sembarangan ya. So you should not throw trash anyhow, and this community is, of course, have their own waste bank, right? And in Denpasar, this is the photo on the right side. It's a photo of a bank sampah in Denpasar that actually collect the organic waste from the communities and to process them from their village. Yeah. So these are done in a smaller scale, right? And at the same time, there are also, self-improvement of public spaces. The left side is an old photo of public space along waterway in Surabaya. The right side is alleyways in Jakarta. All these are being done by the communities themselves. And this is also a form of civic space in which people actually bring their aspirations of what the space should be and how the space is useful for their own communities. This until we can see the scale can even develop into even like a bigger community. So this is a participatory affordable housing, Kampung Susun, as people's active involvement in providing decent housing. Yeah. And this project, actually not just this one project of Kampung Aquarium, it's actually several projects of collective action and policy advocacy, has received the World Habitat Award in 2024, a gold award from the UN Habitat. So this is reflective of what John Friedman termed alternative development. So John Friedman, the late John Friedman, an urban planning scholar, said alternative development is refers to cities by and for citizens. Yeah? On the scale of neighborhood-based development, there are also social ties that can be mobilized for participatory community-based development that are more environmentally sustainable. One more example from the far east of Indonesia. This is from Kampung Yoboy in Papua, and this is also that their effort of self-upgrading. And included in this self-upgrading is not just about painting warna-warni, colorful painting of their walkways, but also they have a community library that is now gaining traction, and also a preservation of sago forest as the community source of food. So it's not just about upgrading their own housing, but also about preserving the forest, preserving the source of food. Yeah. So there might be a point in learning from smaller scale urban communities such as the kampong or the banjar, and the environment as common resources to sustain and to manage, not to over-extract. Yeah? So the photo on the left side is actually something that from a gotong royong from a banjar in Bali, is to cook many, like hundreds and thousands of satay, yeah, for their ceremony. So I'm just reading this. I think this quote is actually very useful for us to reflect on that. This is actually from a public intellectual forum that happened during the pandemic. It happened 5 years ago, in which several scholars actually come together and think about, when the pandemic happened, we're like, what is going on, right? Like, what are we doing wrong? Like, how can we fix this? Is it a time for us to think differently? And that was really the time when we actually, just think about how to do things differently. Yeah. So in some areas of Indonesia, the new mode of governance as alternative development is actually already in place. Yeah? The kampung and the banjar, they are living examples that exemplify the possibility of governance through people's initiatives when physical, social, cultural, and political space is provided in which this can be expressed. Yeah? Besides space, it is also important to allow time for community initiatives to mature. Yeah? So of course, we think about spatial justice. It's not just about providing space. It's about how to provide those spaces and allowing those spaces to mature. Yeah. So when we say alternative development, then we need to think that distributional justice is insufficient, because if we just talk about distribution, there's insufficient acknowledgement of human agency. And we need to think about urban-rural continuum. Yeah, that there's always we need to be able to think critically that there's always inequality. What are we going to do about it? How are we going to make things better? Are we planning to the way we do planning? Are we addressing inequality, or are we perpetuating it? Yeah? So knowing that resource extraction and urban bias are always in place, how are we addressing them? How will we make things better? Yeah? Accessibility to public spaces, they are means of procedural justice. Yeah, and there is always this, thinking about collective governance as a way of alternative development, sustainability of local development, and also affordability of basic needs. And civic spaces is actually very important for sustainability, yeah, because there needs to be more attention to the availability and accessibility of civic spaces in the city, and to address the urban bias and focus on local collective governance for sustainability. After all, addressing environmental concerns represented by all the environmental degradation around us is not just about creating green spaces. Yeah. So let me just close off with some photos again from Nairobi. So I started with a photo from Mukuru when I began. And the photo from Mukuru is again, on the right side. That is the same river and the same settlement. Yeah. And you can see a lot of trash and very polluted river as well. And when you're there, you can actually sense that the air was also quite polluted. Yeah. However, this river is actually the same river as the one on the left side. And on the left, we see all this really nice and green and very seemingly sustainable environment, but that is the same river. These two photos are from the same city, the same river, less than 20 kilometers apart. Yeah. What makes the green river, the nice river on the left side, become the one on the right side? The one on the right side was after they passed through this series of industries that dump all the waste to the river. Yeah. So it's so sustainable. Sustainability, spatial justice is less about creating green spaces, but it is about planning with a new mode of governance, positioning ourselves as planners with commitment to spatial justice as an evolving process that allows for trial and error, and adequate support from the government can ensure continued provision of public goods and enhance commitments to social equity and environmental sustainability. Okay, and this photo is from Nairobi again, from the same informal settlement that I showed you just now. Right. So Let me close off with this photo, and I return the facilitation back to Bu Mada as our moderator.
Bu Rita. Okay, thank you very much, Bu Rita, for the very insightful presentation. So we going back from we jump from the Kenya and then going to Papua. We see many from the coastal area. We see also in the highly area. It's very interesting, Burita. But everyone, if you have any question, you can chat. You can chat in the chat box. But I think we should do the or maybe I don't know. Maybe I have asked the MC first. Nima, can we have can we have a question and answer? I think two speakers should do the lecture first and then we have a discussion, right? Am I not mistaken?
Yeah, maybe the second lecture is
Okay.
already, and then we have
We have a question and answer after.
question and question. Yeah.
Okay, so sorry, Burita. So maybe hold a little bit moment, and all the participants, please, you can type. Maybe if you have any question in your mind, you can try to type in the chat box. But we will have a direct conversation and question and answer after the session of Pak Samsul. So maybe before we jump to the Pak Samsul presentation, I would like to say that Pak Samsul will cannot do live because maybe a little bit afraid about the signal, and I will try to introduce Pak Samsul a little bit to the audience. So Pak Samsul is a lecturer in Regional Development and Environmental Management Laboratory, the same laboratory with me in the Department of Urban and Regional Planning, Universitas Diponegoro. So Pak Samsul got the doctor in the doctoral program of environmental science and in Universitas Diponegoro also. And Pak Samsul has so many research projects focusing about the urbanization and also more focusing about the small border island in and coastal area. So maybe I don't want to take some time too much. So I think Pak Samsul has already prepare for the presentation by video, Burita, because afraid of the signal in the Batam.
Ya, emang Mada moderatornya.
Okay, so maybe anyone can try to open the slide of the Pak Samsul or the recording of Pak Samsul. Okay, thank you. Sorry, I cannot hear any voice. I'm sorry, there's no voice. Maybe session should include the voice first. Okay, so yeah. Burita, can you hear the voice just to make sure that I'm not?
No, I can't hear
Okay.
it. So
So
maybe you need
yeah,
to share sound.
maybe it should tick the box of the sound share to make sure that there's sorry. Yeah, so should have a sound because we cannot hear any sound from the Pak Samsul presentation.
Yeah. In the meantime, while waiting, I would welcome anyone who would like to, ask questions or, being
Any
intrigued
comment?
to. I mean, of course, I kept my presentation general because I thought, it's actually meant to provoke discussions, right? It's not.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Good.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
you actually know more than me, I'm sure, because you all still live day to day in the in Semarang or wherever you're from. So you may witness some of these in your everyday activities, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, do we have the sound? I'm just trying to also,
Found the sound. There's no sound here. I cannot hear also.
So, in this moment, I would
all
like
right. I think we have the sound.
about
Yeah, we have the sound, but I think we should go
fiscal
back
policy
from the beginning.
for the sustainable development.
Okay.
All
Thank
right.
you.
So,
All right.
thank you for coming to my presentation. It's great to see you all. Let me introduce myself. My name is Samsul Ma'rif, a student at Experimental Doctoral Universitas Diponegoro. In this moment, I would like to present about implementation of fiscal policy for the sustainable development of small border island in the Kepulauan Anambas Regency and Kepulauan Riau Province. The problem of small island in maritime national borders area relate to development policy intervention is still lacking. Geographical position raise problem is related to regional accessibility. This is partly due to remote geographical location, the economic scale of business, inadequate transportation condition, limit facility and infrastructure such as electricity, roads, telecommunication, clean water, and others. Small island and entity that has a size, special characteristic, and vulnerability. So that the planning and management of small island requires a different format from largest island. In connection with this problem, it's necessary to increase development intervention through the spatial fiscal policy for sustainable growth. My research background, Anambas Island Regency or Kepulauan Anambas Regency on the Kepulauan Riau province have 10 sub-district and 54 villages in area about 519 kilometers square. And archipelago are mutually interdependent and need a growth center, service center, and archipelago serve the various needs of the population. Fiscal and environmental are important for small island because a consequence of the second opinion is that the pattern of resource utilization is not controlled, so that one time it will run out or run out. Therefore, it's necessary to coordinate between the central government and local government, as well as public participation, to carry out effort to monitor, evaluate, and rebuild the damaged environmental of the small island area. Implementation of fiscal policy for development of the Anambas Island look at the analysis of the carrying capacity of the land. This background my research. Method in this research use descriptive evaluate study approach to answer the problem research. And descriptive study is a method used to analyze the data that has been collected as it is without intending to make a conclusion that apply to the public or a generalization. And this figure are relation about fiscal and spatial and simulation about marginal propensity to concern in Anambas Regency Islands. This is a figure of the relation of fiscal and spatial. Two perspective, yeah, and economic perspective and development perspective. Fiscal, spatial fiscal, is a concept to implementation. Yeah. Implementation about between economical approach and deep environmental approach. After that, using methods land carrying capacity, first about carrying capacity of settlement land and have result a good condition. Yeah. Second, about carrying capacity of agricultural land, and have result production per year are surplus. In the moment is opportunity to the future development. Third, about carrying capacity of water and have a result moderate condition. And the last, land carrying capacity are about environmental carrying capacity using the result of the three previous analysis and have result got good condition. This is result is increasing fiscal simulation compared to the result of environmental carrying capacity, which is relatively limited and decrease over time. So it can be concluded that if the fiscal sector develop with considering an aspect of spatial distribution, it will have a negative impact on the development of small island. One of which is the Anambas archipelago. So that fiscal policy can be used to build small island, but must take into account the spatial aspect in the form of environmental carrying capacity. Kepulauan Anambas Regency hierarchy central government in the Siantan Island, Tarempa cities, Jemaja Island, and Palmatak Island. It's the hierarchy distribution of the central hierarchy. Conclusion, in the research is fiscal approach can be used as a model for the sustainable development of small island in the because it is oriented toward an equitable allocation system. The economic growth of small island in the country's border, maritime national borders, are relatively remote and dependent on each other. Development of the infrastructure sector for needs of the population is also important in relation to fiscal policy, so that everything is served both now and in the next. But infrastructure in terms of electricity, clean water, solid waste, connectivity can all be covered for sustainable development in the island at the border. One of which is the Kepulauan Anambas Regency. Fiscal policy can be to build a small island, but must take into account the spatial aspect in the form of environmental carrying capacity. So, if the fiscal sector develop without considering an aspect of spatial distribution, it will have a negative impact on the development of small island. One of which is the Kepulauan Anambas Regency. Okay, this is my reference of my research. Thank you for your listening. May all those have shared beneficial for all of us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Pak Samsul. Pak Samsul has already here also, I think. Okay, hello, Pak Samsul.
Halo.
Okay, good. Yeah, so we are here, Pak Samsul and Bu Rita. Actually, we are finished for our lecture, both of you. So, ladies and gentlemen, all the participants, if you have any question or remark or maybe a comment for all the two speakers for our today lecture, please you can directly raise your hand, or you can also chat in the chat box if you have any question, and I will read your question. Okay, so I'm trying to looking for the chat. No one here. So maybe I will call for the participant. If you have any question, please you can directly open the mic and then try to ask for the participant. Sorry, for the speaker. Anyone? Or maybe if no, while waiting for another question, maybe Bu Rita and Pak Samsul, maybe because your research is a little bit, we cannot say have Pak Samsul emphasize for the small island, right? And then how about the impact of the fiscal itself for the development, and then Bu Rita more about the social justice. Or maybe Bu Rita has a comment for Pak Samsul research, maybe, or Pak Samsul has a comment for Bu Rita research. Or maybe is there any things that maybe I can ask also Pak Samsul if Pak Samsul has something to clarify again, or maybe want to add something upon the video presentation. Please, Pak Samsul, you can add something maybe, or Bu Rita, you have any question or maybe any comment, please, welcome. While waiting another participant to asking. Yeah.
No, I'm just I'm just still learning about Kepulauan Anambas. So if I do have a question for Pak Samsul, I think Pak Samsul, maybe you can sort of like describe again, like what will be the if you're what is the main what do you say, maybe what will be in your research? Then it seems that what will be the main challenge, environmental challenge that Kepulauan Anambas is facing right now?
Okay. Fiscal is important to remote island because free market no can to intervention about activity in small island characteristic. So fiscal can to improve from other island to development remote island. There is as bantuan ya to develop remote areas. It means fiscal policy by government expenditure from outer to inland can spirit to island characteristic. This means fiscal. If no fiscal, remote island can boost to progress development. That is Bu Rita.
Yeah, because the only like very or the very little that I know about Kepulauan Anambas is that it's been sort of like said as some having potentials for tourism, and also that it's for its basically nature, right, in terms of tourism. But like you said, as small islands, it might it is how much would that affect the balance of the development that is going on in Anambas because of that potential? Is there anything that is going on there right now with regards to the tourism development?
Tourism can improve development island, but not specific to all island. In Anambas, as Pulau Bawah Island, as development by tourism can improve the island, but is distribution for society, but is from investor. That is fiscal from public expenditure can generate to develop island. It means fiscal policy.
Okay. Is there any other comment, maybe Bu Rita, Pak Samsul? And I'm still waiting for another participant to asking. A little bit, I'm so interested actually because like in the case of Pak Samsul, the Anambas is located in the border, right? So just located in the border of the Indonesia and Malaysia, if I'm not mistaken. So is there any like maybe a little bit like some other characteristic that influence about the in Anambas Pak Samsul? Because like I don't know, this is like a location nearby the Malaysia, but so far away from Indonesia. So if you're talking about the fiscal or the support maybe from the government, is there any like conflict maybe or any prioritizing the same?
Different from Singapore as some island. Singapore generate government to develop because Singapore might be full infrastructure support or governance, and Anambas it just regency, not full to support development because Anambas is remote island, low development. The situation different Singapore as island and Anambas island too.
Yeah, I think if
Yeah.
we want to connect what Pak Samsul is explaining about the small islands, right, and the question about spatial justice is again this kind of seemingly inequality between the centralization of economic activities in urban centers versus what is going on in because Indonesia have thousands of islands, and the urban centers are only in the big islands, and most of them are actually in Java and probably Sumatra. But the small islands, as much as I understand, is facing a lot of environmental as well as economic issues as well because of them always being in the fringes. Just even smaller islands, just very near to Jakarta, for example. Jakarta, oftentimes people forget when we talk about Jakarta, it's not just these 5 municipalities under the DKI Jakarta right now, but there are 6, and the 6th is actually Kepulauan Seribu. We go out to just, and it's not that far, from the biggest city in Indonesia, but the situation is completely different. The kinds of attention as well as infrastructures and all those are very different. So that is that happened to like small islands just very near to the capital, but when it's smaller islands that are even further away, then the question would be about how the kinds of development that are taking place over there, as well as what needs to be done in terms of supporting that development if needed, because many of these islands have existed even before even before the political structure that we have right now, right? So there may be some local traditional indigenous systems that are in place, the sea-based economy rather than the land-based economy. I'm just talking about this in general because even in terms of thinking about Kepulauan Riau in general, the island culture and the island economy is actually quite different. Even Singapore, when it transitioned into this like area, I always tell my students, Singapore is not an island city state. Anyone who say that it's an island city state should correct themselves, because actually it's an archipelago. It's not an island city state. But because of the centralization of the economy in the main island, and that's why it's seen as if it's just one island. But actually, Singapore started with 70 islands. And out of those 70 islands, like most of them are actually small islands. And it's part of the Riau archipelago. And the way that people actually relate to each other in the Riau archipelago is historical. That's why the sea culture, the trades, and all that are actually quite unique. So again, I'm not very familiar with Kepulauan Anambas. I mean, I'm not there. I just happened to observe some of the smaller islands off the coast of Singapore, and do some research with people who used to live there, and found all these like very interesting stories about how the local cultures and the local economies have developed even before everything is centralized to the big city. Yeah.
Okay. Very interesting, Bu Rita. And then I came up in my mind actually while waiting. Another participant has a question, yeah, because you mentioned about the centralization in the main island, and then we have several islands just like located dispersed of the Indonesia, and also like but actually we know facing about the digital nomad, or you name it, about that kind of thing. So when we talk about the infrastructure, it's not only hard infrastructure, right? But we talk about the soft infrastructure. I can imagine that when we go to the Ambon one day, and then live there 2 days, and feels that I feel so connected, because even in the small island, in the Bajan Island, I feel so connected because I have so many good infrastructure. I have so many internet, abundant of internet. So many I can directly connect with all the region, even I'm in a small island. So when you talk about I go back when you talk about the spatial justice. Yeah, is there any things that can be influenced about that kind of things when we talk about by location, because the border is not there again, we have the internet, we can connect one another. And then is there any things because if you talk, because I imagine when you talk about the urban bias, and then is there and going back like a forward, and then it's well connected with something that we can see in the physically. But actually, when we talk about now in the nomad, and I go to the Ambon, and I go also going there in the Rawan Island, I can connect it. Yeah, but it's a tourism. Yeah, it's not a daily life. Something like that. So, but I just imagine that maybe one day we can build a city, not have to be like in infrastructure, and I can imagine Anambas can do that kind of things also. Just thinking about that. Maybe Burita.
I think I don't know. I think but Samsul and I we grew up without, when we were small. I think Pak Samsul still remember, right? We grew up without internet. We don't even have. I mean, we may not even. I didn't have a computer at home, and so there were times that when we actually lived without the internet. And then when the internet came about, it was a game changer, and there were a lot of optimism around it. There were there were speculations, that maybe locations don't matter anymore. Maybe people don't need to commute anymore. They can work from home. We tried that during the pandemic, right? And it was like we forced ourselves to work from anywhere. But it was actually happening, and yeah, it is. There are things that are happening on that front. The increasingly as we actually and I think internet first came to public use in probably 1990s in this region, and then it just proliferates from there. And now with the invention of the mobile internet connection, then the game changes anymore. You don't need to actually have like a computer station. You can actually have it on the go. I would say that it does create a new kind of space that people can interact. And these new spaces are they coexist with the existing physical spaces. And so we at any point in time, we always have multiple realities. You know, I'm now sitting in my office somewhere in Singapore. Pak Samsul is sitting somewhere in Anambas, and Mada, you are in Semarang, probably. We don't even know exactly where we are. But then we also are interacting in this space, in this Zoom. So this reality happens along with, you know, when somebody walks out there in my office, I could see. But you don't know that there's somebody there. That is not part of your reality, but that's part of my reality. And your realities are actually interacting somewhere else, right? So it's just a different kind of space that we are entering right now. Increasingly, though, I would say that that is a new kind of space, but the inequality persists, right? So we never really talk about addressing the inequalities. And so these new spaces are growing with the same kind of inequalities. Sometimes people can figure it out, sometimes they don't. Those who can figure it out, you know, in a moment, then they can join to be the pioneers. But then after that, it's just that moment when things reopen in this new space, then everything is like up for grabs, and then after that, then the space is closes again, and the system is just, you know, stabilized, right? And studies also show that, for example, in countries in Southeast Asia, countries that are less urbanized, they tend to have less internet connections as well. So Laos, for example, is also one of the countries in Southeast Asia that has lesser people connected to the internet. Doesn't mean that they are not connected to the internet, but the internet connections are not as good as the countries that are more urbanized. Yeah. So that means that while we have more connections, and Mada, you also acknowledged that, you know, you went there for tourism, and the fact that you can find that place through maybe some online searches means that that place is somehow connected, you know, to the internet. But at the same time, the internet doesn't really resolve this situation of inequality that spatial justice is talking about. And so in Anambas, for example, the question is really, would anyone invest in bringing that infrastructure to Anambas, that internet connection? Why Pak Samsul was worried about the internet connection being there and have to record his presentation, that also signifies something about maybe it's not as reliable. Yeah? And so if anyone is investing there, will it be the people of Anambas themselves? It's unlikely. It might be people from Jakarta, it might be people from, I don't know, from China or from America, from India, I don't know. Yeah, so again, the ones who are bringing that infrastructure in might actually also, you know, bring new kinds of relations that may not actually address the inequality. So I don't know. I just feel that it's just a different kind of space that we are talking about in the cyberspace, and it might have its own issues about spatial justice within that virtual space.
Yeah, very interesting, Bu Rita. Okay, so Pak Samsul, you have any comment maybe for our discussion about that while waiting for another participant to asking or comment? Yeah. So actually one thing that's very interesting in when I'm going to the Maluku Utara, yes, because like they have very good PDB per capita. So about the fiscal, maybe it's a lot about the fiscal. So the people there's don't have any no concern with it, not being treated by us as a people outside their region to coming there or build something there, because they have their own like a capability of the economic. So they not feel that that kind of things will be going to be maybe inequality or something like that. Maybe the conflict is because they have their own basic need very high, because their GDP per capita is very high in Maluku Utara. So just can imagine that maybe we can also have this what is like connected with Pak Samsul talking about the fiscal ability of the region can also bring up the things like that, in my opinion.
That is so, Mada.
Yeah. Pak Samsul have any comment maybe?
Small island, very different characteristic, and to develop just from external, from government, not for market, because small island operated by closed market. So need to protect by government as source finance.
Okay, so yeah, we have one person who will asking Nimas. Okay, Nimas.
Okay, Bu Mada and Rita and Pak Samsul, maybe I want to add something about the small island and about the civic justice and in many small islands, maybe tourism and conservation often dominated land use. And take the example like Nusa Penida or the Gili Island in Lombok. So once traditional fishing and like sea farming communities now is transformed into tourist hotspots, right? So and at the same time the maybe the conservation zones like marine protect areas are often designed with ecological priorities but without fully including community voice. So this raise the main my question is, can small island pursue tourism and conservation without the marginalizing the like the very communities who sustain this place? Or and maybe in how can we balance economical goals with spatial justice for local communities such as Nusa Penida or the others island in Indonesia or maybe in other country? Thank you. Maybe that's my question.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So please Pak Samsul and Bu Rita can answer. Okay.
Yeah. Nusa Penida and Gili Trawangan development support by tourism resource can grow from strategic sector, but Anambas is a remote island, so far from growth center. Transportation, low infrastructure, but Nusa Penida near Denpasar or Gili Trawangan near Lombok Island can develop from main island. is different to characteristic small island about Nusa Penida and Anambas. So plan near main island can support from growth center. This is Bu Mada.
Okay, so yeah, how about the economic growth that Nimas asking before? Pak Samsul, is there any maybe comment or any remark from you? Or maybe Bu Rita want to add something, please?
Pak Samsul duluan.
Yeah, please, Pak Samsul.
Yeah, small island, remote small island can build from growth government by fiscal policy, because small island is non-market island. Fiscal can grow to development by influenced by government to distribute
Pak Samsul is freezing. Pak Samsul, are you there? We cannot hear your voice.
Yeah, I think it's a connection problem.
Yes, I think the connection problems, or maybe you want to add something else.
Yeah, I think I'm just gonna come at it from a slightly different perspective. I think, you know, when we talk about development, we do need to be very clear about the purpose of development. And I think when we say that for small islands, like Pak Samsul already very clearly also say to us that small islands are different. Small islands have their own sort of how to say systems, you know, social, economic, and cultural systems that are particular to small islands. The problem that we usually have is that our way of development is very much, and which is why which explains why we keep urbanizing, right? That it becomes an aspiration. Like we see these photos of, you know, of these cities, and we say, okay, we need to be like that. However, actually, there are many ways of development, and I think the best way to approach this is really to really do a needs assessment, like what do people actually need, and it needs to be contextual rather than being informed by the models that we already have. And I think this is the part that we need to, and I think, you know, Undip has PWK, you know, I think this is something that needs to be thought about by regional planning schools in Indonesia. What would be the contribution of regional planning schools in Indonesia to what the world needs to know? You know, I think we don't need to keep sticking to the kinds of regional developments that are focusing on cities and big cities, or maybe, you know, these urban-rural connection things that we keep we keep talking about, in how is Indonesia unique to the world? Indonesia is an archipelago. No other country actually have as many islands as Indonesia. Like Indonesia is a country with the most small islands in the whole world. But why is it that there is no planning model that comes from small islands in Indonesia? So I think that is a challenge, and that is very important. So and being based in Singapore, a lot of Indonesian colleagues always ask me, "Oh, Singapore is so good, everything works well, infrastructure, da da da. In Indonesia, the roads, not taken care well. Everybody's out for themselves and things like that." Then I said, "Yeah, but the problem is because there are too many people actually keep looking up to Singapore to find the answer." And I think, and especially for the small islands, the development for small islands is really, it has to be based on the knowledge that we have and that the people in the small islands have. If we look at the matrix of the procedural justice, do people actually have a voice? Are people actually, are they being brought to the table? And also, and the question of neutrality, right? Neutrality is very, very difficult. I don't think it ever happens, but if we think that, okay, when we come, people from Semarang comes to Anambas and say, "Oh, I'm from Semarang," that is already something that is unequal, because Semarang has more access to resources right now compared to Anambas, but Anambas may have access to different kinds of resources that Semarang doesn't have, so I think those things have to be sorted out first. And if we go back to how John Friedman, say about alternative development, we don't focus on the term development itself. Rather, we focus on the objective of the development. And he proposed that development has to focus on what he called as human flourishing. Yeah. So how would a society capable of facilitating the members of the society to achieve everyone's full potential, that everyone can, usually we say, okay, everyone has to have a chance to go to school, for example, but going to school is actually part of the larger goal of facilitating everyone to achieve full potentials. The types of schools, the types of education need to be tailored based on what the society needs to achieve that human flourishing. I think that is something that probably we need to listen more to the small islands, because so far it seems that there's not enough listening that is done, and the big cities are too loud. And even, when Pak Samsul was presenting, I was, searching about Kepulauan Anambas, because I felt like, I really don't know anything about it, And then I found that there seems to be there was a controversy a few months ago about 2 islands in Anambas that are going on sale. Like how did that happen? And then of course it was rebutted, it was denied, that, and then the posts were taken down. But yeah, the kinds of development that needs to take place, it might need rethinking. No, I would say that it definitely needs rethinking. It's not the kind of development that we used to think about when we talk about the cities, region, or mega region that we are familiar with.
Yeah, Rita, very interesting remark and highlight, I guess, about the things that's very Indonesian. I can imagine that, yeah, we should have our own handbook of planning in a small island, I think, like that kind of archipelago. Things that I
Yeah.
don't, another country don't have the same as the big as no, as many as us.
Yeah, the only other country that can do it is the Philippines, I think.
Yeah,
And maybe we can look into like countries in the Pacific Islands, maybe New Zealand can teach us a thing or two, but at the same time, it's a different context, right? But in terms of the environment, probably, being small islands and stuff and all that. But yeah, but culturally, geographically, I think Indonesia, there are lots of potential there.
So we have, and not only archipelago, but we are also the region archipelago with populated area in several island, right? So
Right.
that's so not all, not well distributed, and then yeah, we have a big city also. So I can imagine about that. Nah. Yeah. So sorry because Pak Samsul I think has a problem with the connection until now. I cannot see Pak Samsul here in our screen.
Hmm.
Okay, so maybe.
Sorry, Bu Mada.
Okay, hi Pak Samsul going
Pak
back.
Samsul ada dua tadi, jadi yang satu aja yang hilang.
We have two Pak Samsul here. Which one then? Okay, so Pak Samsul, maybe you want to add something about the things that interrupt before. Want to continue for the discussion, please. Wait. So, but Pak Samsul still talking about the impact of the economic in the small island. Okay.
Okay.
Please, Pak Samsul.
Development small island can by fiscal policy. It can grow to develop. Example, a teacher or nurses in the small island transfers by public expenditure can buy something in the island. It growth consumption. Yeah. Transferability from government to human resource in small island can generate economic growth in the small island by expenditure. That's if based on market, maybe can to develop. It's Bu Mada.
Okay, Pak Samsul. So thank you for the remarks actually. So while waiting another participant to asking, wait. So everyone, if you have any question, you can also ask in Bahasa Indonesia. It's okay, and we will read your question. If you cannot open your mic, you can also type your question in chat box. And then yeah, okay. We're still waiting for another participant. Yeah. Or maybe Bu Rita or Pak Samsul has another remark or maybe another comment for our discussion, please.
Yeah, keeping things warm, yeah, Mbak Mada, so
Yeah.
that we don't fall into like very awkward silence that often happens in these Zoom meetings. Yeah, what I learned from my students actually when we do these Zoom meetings, increasingly they're taking it on their phones, and so that's why the chat is usually a little challenging, because when you're taking Zoom on your phones, then texting becomes more difficult, and so and sometimes it's not they're not in places in which you can't you can just say something, maybe because that's what happened right now. Like everybody has multiple realities, and people may tune in to us just. I'm actually resorted to the fact that we can actually treat this as it's as one of the realities that students are facing right now. And of course, that's something that might explain why the questions are not very forthcoming. But also, of course, there are always the possibility that students are just shy.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, I think, I was thinking of something just now when Pa Samsul was, giving an example about fiscal. Let me just give an example about why in small islands we should not replicate the kinds of developments that we are doing in big islands or big cities. Let's say, cities usually come with, we assume that cities come with infrastructures, right? Like roads, water, electricity, and in the past, phone lines and all that, right? Sewer system. But small islands, maybe the density is not as big as cities. Population size may not be as big, and the kinds of developments there, the kinds of living arrangements are different. No, lesser high rises probably, and maybe different kinds of economies, right? So, but in that kind of situation, right, then how do we, if they say, okay, everybody has to have clean water, yeah, do we think about like a very centralized system of water supply, like laying down the pipes, digging the pipes and all those things, or are there arrangements in which people actually have like supply points that they can go to, thinking about something that is more decentralized, um, and things actually have their own their consequences. If we rely on pipes, for example, where do the pipes come from? Do they have to be brought in? And if there are damages, what about the maintenance regime? So if the materials are not indigenous materials, then it will actually have an impact on the capacity to maintain, and it might actually create dependency to the suppliers that are outside the islands, and so on and so forth, and that makes things expensive. Or maybe in terms of sanitation, uh, Singapore, for example, have this deep tunnel sewerage system. Everything is centralized, and everything is brought into all these like water treatment plants. But in small islands, would that actually be relevant? Or should we actually think about something that is more decentralized, maybe empowering communities or maybe households to be able to manage their own waste? The kinds of enabling environments for more decentralized systems that probably work better. I don't know. But again, I'm just thinking about the kinds of models that need to be rethought. I always say this whenever, somebody told me, for example, oh, Singapore is very good in this public housing system. We have to do this in Indonesia. I said, no, I don't think you should do this in Indonesia. But that's something that that many don't actually realize, that this is something that is contextual. The amount, when the government in Singapore, for example, is in fact the largest developer on the land, then yeah, then the government is delivering public housing system that's for the majority of the population. But for the governments who are not even having like political clout against developers, then that might not be the answer, because the developers might actually overpower the governments in terms of the policies. And so making that something that is centrally delivered might not be suitable for different kinds of governance. Yeah. So I think in small islands, we can also think about like it's definitely different kinds of governance system again, so from housing needs, provision of basic needs, those are the things that needs to be configured and understood from the small islands. So rather than bringing what we say, oh, this is must be good for the small islands, maybe people who live in the small islands, they know better what works over there and what are the materials that may be more sustainable to be applied there.
Yeah. Imagine that, Bu. Because like I can imagine that in a small island they are like not all of them like a closed system, right? Because like if you can make it in a one loop together only in that kind of island can be more sustainable and they can fulfill their own need. I can imagine that because the connection issue is become very important one other island. I can imagine about not only about the infrastructure, hard infrastructure. I can imagine about the electricity also. Yeah,
Yeah.
because my friends told that it's not easy to bring the electricity to small island because they have to make an alternative, not cannot be used as a grand as a big chunk of the cable, something like in the big island. So it's very different, the challenge, can you imagine? Yeah, very interesting remarks. Okay, so maybe I will call the last call for the participant who have any interest to asking or question or comment. Is there any wait, I will try to see in the chat box. No one in horizon. So maybe before we maybe I will try to close this session, maybe Burita and Pak Samsul. But before we close this session, I would like to call your closing remark from both of you for our discussion. Maybe the first I will call Pak Samsul to give our closing remarks. Please, Pak
Okay.
Samsul. Okay.
Yeah. Fiscal policy as an alternative, non-conventional to development remote island area.
Okay, so very straightforward, open closing remark from Pak Samsul. So Burita, do you have any closing remark for our discussion today?
Yeah, this is not fair.
No, it's okay. Maybe
No,
after this,
it's okay.
ask Pak Samsul to give
No,
another.
I'm just joking. I'm just joking. Since my theme is about special justice, that's why I thought there's something that is quite off the cuff kind of.
Closing remarks, injustice.
Yeah. So again, I would say that when we think about planning and when we think about sustainability, we do need to think about justice, and to deliver that justice is really to know better about the society that we are living in, the society in which we are working in. So it's not gonna. We may need to also think about something that is already there. Like I said in my presentation, is that when we say that we need a new mode of governance, it's not really instantly, think about okay, a new kinds of governance, but really learn from what is already there, and let them evolve, and um, really providing space and time and also attention to places that we rarely hear about, to contribute to our knowledge on um, how to live sustainably. And so, so probably that's what I was that's what I'm sort of like taking away from in comparing, the domination of big cities versus the kinds of marginalization that small islands have been receiving. And when I say marginalization, it's not only in terms of the practice, but also in terms of imagination, in terms of knowledge building. How much do we actually know about it? And when it's not even in our breadth of knowledge, how would we even start thinking about talking about justice and procedural justice and sustainability eventually? Yeah.
Okay, very very nice and very insightful, Bu Rita and Pak Samsul, about our discussion today. I have also a little bit notes in my mind. Actually, I would like to express that actually, maybe when we talk about the definition or the context, something like more about the justice and etc., we should like going back like where we are actually. So where is it? So maybe it can be more like contextualizing, because the definition that Pak Samsul give us is not the same with small island, big island, and then Rita also talking about the Justit itself has their own. Yeah, it's not the same actually, but actually we going there. So maybe that's very interesting discussion for us today. We are so sorry if there any technical problem and something like that from me as a moderator also. But before we close our session, we would like to have a photo session. Sorry, maybe anyone can help me to do the photo session for us together. So yeah, wait, I will give it to the, okay, yeah. Anyone, if you can open your open your camera, please, you can open your camera. We will have a photo session together. Okay, so yeah, who will take the photo session? Nimas, maybe?
Yeah, we'll have to take a photo session.
Thank you. Okay. So yeah, maybe you have to remove the pin first, Nimas.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's already in my laptop.
Okay, good.
Okay. 1, 2, and 3.
Okay.
Okay, maybe one more time.
Okay, thank you.
1, 2, and 3.
Okay. Yeah. Okay then. So thank you very much, Burita, for your very insight lecture discussion, and I have so many experiences. I hope the participant also. Thank you so much, Pak Samsul, for your insight and your lecture about the small island, and I hope everyone has a very great experience today for our lecture. So I'm from Moderator. We'll going give back to Nimas as a MC. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ibu Rita and Pak Samsul, for such an inspiring and fruitful discussion we have here today, right? And thank you also, Bu Mada, for moderating in the main session. And before we close this event, I would like to remind to all participants to fill out the attendance form that have shared in the chat column. And also, we would like to say thank you for the support from the honorable guest lecture today. And we greatly appreciate your time to be here with us in this morning. And this event is about to come to the very end. I hope you have found the presentation today informative and helpful. And we hope that this event will bring inspiration and a positive impact for all of us. For those who would like to hear this international lecture series again, please kindly check our YouTube channel at PWK Undip TV Official. And please forgive us for our shortcomings. We look forward to seeing you in the next international lecture series. I hope you all have a good day. Thank you, good afternoon, and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Bye.
everyone. Thank you, Bu Rita. Thank you, Pak
Bu
Samsul.
Rita, Bu Mada.
Have a nice
Saya
day.
pamit dulu ya.
Sama-sama.
Rita.
Bye.
Bye.